there.
I think I'm going to blow this out for now.
Thank you. Hey, Randy. Are there a lot of people in the community center?
Let me sort of go over and...
Would you?
Yeah.
Sorry. I really want people to come. I want them to hear my little intro. They heard the intro. Matt hates when I do that. I'm always like, I want to get your opinion. And then do the intro. I do it to everyone, so.
Guardians won last night. Get your raise.
Ooh. Rivalry. Sensing the tension.
We had beat Rough Mounds. We had over like Charlotte.
Bieber, really? There's Bieber? Nice. There's a Bieber.
Yeah. Yeah.
To go.
Let's go.
Woo!
All right.
Hello. Wow. Hello. Is it good? Aren't we? We're like
That's right.
bar stools. That's all it takes. Young people are like, oh, should I go to this church or not? And then they see the bar stools. Puts them over the edge.
My generation was rock music, so.
Yeah. It's just bar stools. We're easy to please, millennials. Okay, well, good morning again. Thank you so much for coming. This conversation is called Hope for New Growth. This is, Ryan and I are going to be presenting this, but it's on behalf of the leadership board, so you can kind of picture another group of people behind us, kind of leadership board ghosts, also with us presenting this information. So we're going to kind of go back and forth, take leads on different slides, and then we will have plenty of time, is my hope, for Q&A and some discernment together. So as you're listening, be thinking of what questions you have. But first, by way of introduction, I want to talk about the 4th century. I want to talk about the 300s AD. When the early Christians went to the desert to try to grow closer to God, this is a common prayer that they prayed. We beg you, God, make us truly alive. Isn't that beautiful? We beg you, God, make us truly alive. And I think it's fascinating that they went to the desert full of dead things, dead sand, right, in order to ask to be alive. This weekend, we're getting at the same idea, right? We're talking about seed and plant imagery. We're talking about, making us alive like mustard weeds that are growing everywhere, unassuming yet tenacious. We're talking about rhizomes, these plants that kind of work underground and then shoot up these little shoots everywhere. We're talking about, it's hard to pronounce, Mycorrhizae is a fungi that apparently forms a symbiotic relationship with about 90% of plants in the entire world. So these fascinating plant lives all around us, right? We want to be a church like that. We want God to make our church truly alive and make the things that we touch come to life as well, right? These symbiotic, beautiful relationships. This is what we're hoping for. So I want to start this presentation, with some of this imagery, but then I want to name some of the life that is already happening in our conference. So this is not a comprehensive list, but I'm going to go to the next slide. We just came out with these really cool Ken Gingrich designed postcards. Yeah, Ken Gingrich. That, of course, on the front say, together we are pursuing God's dream by the power of the Holy Spirit in the way of Jesus Christ, which has been kind of our mission statement for a long time as a conference. And so I'm just going to read off how we're describing ourselves to the world as you can hand out these to folks. So who are we? We are Colorado. We are New Mexico. We are rural and urban. We are progressive, conservative, and moderate. We are Latinx, Asian, Black, white, mixed race. We are straight and queer. We profoundly disagree with each other. We profoundly love each other. We are following Jesus and working for peace and justice in this broken and beautiful world, reaching out to immigrants, those formerly incarcerated, folks without homes, folks without hope. We are Mennonites in mountain states, and we welcome you. What are we up to? Well, we gather together in communities to worship God and to laugh, learn, praise, sing, grieve, march, eat, and grow together. We also actively support ministries, our passion ministries, that are dreaming of a better world, including Raw Tools, Tilt, and Prayer Stream, and we give descriptions of each of those on here. Of course not comprehensive, but to give people a little bit of a feel of what we're up to. And I loved this morning where we called out the names of the different organizations. I thought that was wonderful to see, like, look at all that we represent, all the bodies standing behind each one of you, right? Of these folks that you are representing, these lives that are so important to us as a conference. So I start by naming who we are and our work in the world because I truly believe that it's amazing. I truly believe that we are supporting each other and making a difference in our communities. I truly believe that if our conference ceased to be tomorrow, we would have a lot of hurting people in this world. I also want to name that my experience in almost 2 years now as being conference minister is that we have some pretty healthy structures as a conference. So if you were asking for a state of the union, I would say that we actually are in a good place. We have had all kinds of various different crises, and yet I see them handled with respect and with care and with concern. I have been a part of quite a few different dysfunctional systems, and I have no complaints about mountain states. Honestly, there are emotionally intelligent folks, there are a lot of healthy leaders, there's a lot of caring people. Again, not perfect, but in general, when we come across crises, we are handling them in generally healthy ways, and I think that's worth noting and worth saying that's worth sustaining, right? So we're already up to some pretty fantastic work. We are already growing these Jesus-centered communities that love and nurture this hurting world, this beautiful world, right, that are reaching out to the folks around us. And so with that as a foundation, this presentation, what we're going to talk about today, is asking, how do we sustain and how do we grow this work in the years to come? That is our question. So now I'm going to let Ryan talk.
All right. So it was, I think, the end of October, beginning of November of last year. It was actually Amy and I's first time getting together in person because of the pandemic. And Amy had just been on the job for about a year, and she was getting antsy. If you don't know Amy, Amy has dreams upon dreams upon dreams and visions and wants to keep doing things.
No.
And this first year, she was spent listening and learning and connecting the best that she could virtually. But she kept, either hearing people say it or imagining people saying it. I'm not sure which one. What are you doing next?
Hearing.
And I think you were imagining people, because I don't think anybody was saying it yet in the middle of a pandemic. But you were like, people want to know what's coming next. And so we decided before a regional meeting of pastors to get together at a coffee shop up in Arvada. And Amy had page upon page upon page of notes written out.
Okay, it was like 2 or 3.
Which, of all these things that she had ideas for. And it was just a brainstorming session about dreams and hopes and visions that we want to do as a conference. And so we both just threw out ideas. And I like to throw out bad ideas, and Amy likes to take my bad ideas and make fun of them and then come up with something a little bit better.
Definitely do.
And she likes to throw out lots of good ideas that we can't afford.
Also accurate.
And somehow together in that conversation, we kept circling around to 2 main dreams. We already had proposed and had the Future Anabaptist leaders going at last delegate assembly. And so we're like, what can we do next? And the things that really emerged and bubbled up were church planning and then also social enterprise. And we're both like, these are great ideas, great things. And I'm like, but how can we afford to do either? Church planning is so expensive if you want to do it right. I mean, you can pretend to not pay people well and do something and then it fails. And church planning is more likely than not is going to fail, but if you don't, really put money and resources and time into it, it's almost guaranteed to fail. And then also social enterprise, trying to create something that's going to generate some revenue, costs money to do. And we're like, both of these things, they're really ambitious. How are we going to prioritize them? Let's just think about it and figure out what we want to do next. So that was Thursday. Friday afternoon, I get an email saying, we just received $338,000 estate gift from a completely unexpected donor who I have never met.
To the conference. For us to do what we want.
Yep. And so immediately I call Amy up and be like, Amy, you're not going to believe this. And I never call Amy up. Like, we have a set time to talk or whatever, and that's it. So, like, if I call Amy, it's like the end of the world, emergency. Yeah. She knows that it's trouble. So I call her up, and she's like, why are you calling me? We just talked yesterday. I'm like, you're not going to believe this. We just received news that we're receiving $338,000 as a conference. And so those things that we talked about yesterday, maybe we can make them happen. And so Amy and I kept talking. We had some leadership board transitions, and so we didn't really want to overwhelm the leadership board who was just leaving. We had 3 people of 5 leaving in about a month, and so we said we're going to put this on the back burner and started up in January with the new leadership board. And since then, the leadership board has been really taking our ideas, honing them, offering suggestions, and that's where we are presenting here today.
So I just want to reiterate a couple things about his story. The first is this was the first time we'd written down our ideas about this.
We is not right.
That I'd written them down. And the first time we'd kind of formally sat down at a coffee shop to talk about our dreams, right? The day after, people, this call comes. And I don't know, it felt like a miracle. I could be wrong. It felt like a miracle. It felt it felt amazing. And it felt like these ideas may not be ironclad. We may not even go forward with these ideas, but it felt like this reassurance of, yeah, go ahead, dream. Like, it's okay to dream. It's okay to have sheer hope for the future. Like, just hope. Just hope, and don't worry about all these things like money as much as you usually do, right? Like, just hope for a while. It felt like that. So we don't want to be spiritually manipulative and say, God put God's stamp of approval on these ideas, and if you're going against miracles if you don't approve these today as delegates. We're not saying that, but what we are saying is that it really felt like reassurance that yes, we need to be having these conversations, and it's very exciting, and it's okay to hope, right? It's okay to just dream for a while and not have all the details figured out, and maybe those details will come like the day after, maybe.
Yeah. All right. And so just before we get started here, what we're doing here is to prepare for the delegate session. In the delegate session, we are going to be asking the delegates to approve how to use that $338,000. And so basically what you'll see here are the main initiatives of the things that we would like to do as a conference. And so there'll be some time for discussion at the end here, and I'd prefer to have as much of that discussion here so that we can not have that much discussion during the delegate session, because we have lots of other things to do at that time. So, Initiative 1, growth, cultivating new communities, focusing intently on church planting. And this has been something that leadership board have been talking about for, I don't know, at least 6 months before me and Amy sat down. Zach Martinez, who's on the leadership board, deeply passionate about church planting, prepared this awesome presentation for us, presenting places that we could church plant, different ideas, different models, why it's so important. And we're like, yeah, that's great. We don't have any money to do that, but we're great. We want to do this work, but yeah. Thanks, Zach. But when we sat down, we're like, we really do need to do this. We are a small conference in a small region, and yet a region that is full of potential. Full of a potential for Mennonite ideals, Mennonite communities, people that are thinking through things and want to be more nonviolent, want to show love and grace and hospitality to enemies, not just their friends. And I think this is a great place when we think about where the future of Mennonite church is. I mean, urban areas, cities, Denver, it just has so much to offer along with other regions. And so we were like, we want to commit to planting churches or planting communities. Communities that are built and created for the 21st century, that are anti-colonialistic, that are anti-racist, that are really working to progress the values that we as Mennonites believe in to the generations of today and tomorrow and the future. And we think that need for community is greater than ever, and what we have to offer is something that we too often hide and keep to ourselves. And so we want to see a large percentage of this money going to hopefully starting and planting some seeds for some new communities. And so we haven't done any work on these things yet. We wanted to get delegate approval and we wanted to get feedback. So there's no task force that has been formed yet. There's no plans for how much each church plant would get, anything like that. I know one thing we've heard as leadership board is that sometimes it feels like delegates, you bring us things that you just want us to rubber stamp and you already have the things planned. We didn't want that at all. These are just things we've been talking about and we'll be processing, and we'll be needing you all to help us going forward with. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just one more thing on the term church planting. When I've just thrown that about, a lot of people have hesitancy even about the term church planting, right? Because it brings up these colonialistic, I am a straight white male, I go into a new community, I am charismatic, everyone follows me, and it just looks a certain way, and we're like, we don't need more of that, right? And so we are open, and actually really we would seek ideas or beginnings of ideas or beginnings of communities that really reflect our values, that maybe they don't get called church. I mean, maybe we call them communities, maybe we call them fellowship, maybe we call, have different language for it. That's fine. Maybe they have really creative online components as well as in person, and maybe, all sorts of creativity. That's what we're looking for. And I am just as cringy about some of the terminology that's colonialistic as many of you are. And so just so we're clear about the language, some folks, church planting may resonate with them, but some it may be more like community building or starting new communities kind of thing. So just, to name that.
All right, next slide. Next thing that we want to work on is creating an alternative revenue stream, as I like to call it. She likes to call it, social enterprise, side gig, whatever. Right? Ways for the conference to find other ways of providing funding for ourselves while also doing good in the world. How can we keep ourselves sustainable long term, especially if we want to do things like church planting. Church planting is not going to bring in money. Like, that's just not, maybe 50 years from now, if they're successful, they're going to, but it takes a long time for churches to get sustainable in planting, and it costs a lot of money to do so. We know where we are in the world today. Everything is going up. Salaries are going up. You're going to see that as churches when next year, when we deal with inflation for pastors. Pastor salaries are going to go up next year quite a bit. That's what it means to do ministry today in the world. It is expensive. And I know all of our local communities are feeling that pinch too. So we really do feel as a conference that we need an alternative revenue stream to support the work that we're doing going forward. And so we have some examples of other conferences that are doing some similar things. Pacific Southwest opened up a thrift store, I don't know, maybe not even 10 years ago. And it was hugely successful, and then the pandemic changed things, and now it's being very successful again. For the longest time in Western District Conference, they had a rural-urban beef thing where the rural churches provide beef to the urban churches, and it was a way of providing funding. Atlantic Coast Conference used to have, I think they might still, they had a bike shop as a way of repairing bikes and promoting bike transportation. And then it just closed, but in DC there was the hospitality house that provided funding for the conference for years upon years. So this is nothing new. It might be new to our conference, and we have different ideas about what that would look like, but we have not worked out any details about what this social enterprise might mean and how we might make it happen. So we would, again, if it was approved by delegates, we would form a task force specifically for this issue to work on exactly what that social enterprise would be and what we would need to make it happen. And so when we were doing some of this, even pre-discussion, I had Amy read a book by Samuel Wells. Samuel Wells is a pastor at a church in England who is very involved in their church in social enterprise. And one of the things that Samuel Wells said is there's not one model for doing social enterprise as a church. There's particularly three. And so if we can see on this slide, there's instrumental, there's exemplary, and there's social. Instrumental just wants to make money. Doesn't care how it makes money. It wants to make money in a social enterprise so that the main organization, our conference, would have as much money to do its mission. There is social, where making money isn't really the goal. The goal is to make a difference in the world, and that is its mission. The enterprise is the mission as much as the organization itself. They are so lined together that money isn't the primary goal. And sometimes they never make money, and that's okay. That is fine if that's your social model. What we're trying to do, propose, is something in the middle, which is called exemplary. It's not about making as much money as one can, but it's also wants to make a difference. Fair wages, do things in an exemplary way. As it says here, minimize our environmental footprint. So we want to make money, maybe not make as much as we possibly can, but we also want to do it ethically. And so we're proposing that this social enterprise movement would be of the exemplary model. Anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, so you can think of an example would be like a thrift store where it's, people donate, it recycles things that might have gone to the landfill otherwise. You're creating employment for people. You can be specific about who you hire, right? And then the whatever is made from it goes to the conference. So that sort of model would be an exemplary model where it's not a full nonprofit. It would still be considered a for-profit, but it's definitely not exploiting workers, right? It should in no way be exploitative in its process as well as its outcomes. So, it doesn't have to be that. I'm not saying we should do that in particular, but that would be an example. So, yep.
Yep. All right. We also want to spend and use some of this money to fund the Future Anabaptist Leaders program. We've sent out a survey this spring, maybe late in the winter, one of the two, early spring, late winter, to churches, and we're like, how many of you would be interested in an intern working with it, where we pay for some, you pay for some, we partner together and have some sort of intern this summer or during the fall? And six of our communities said, yes, we want this.
Yeah, you were one, yeah.
And we're like, that's amazing. We don't have funding to do 6. We could do 1 maybe. And we tried to do 1, and that one for the summer fell through. But we're like, there is a huge desire within our conference for this. And we set aside money to where we could probably do 3 total, and we didn't want to use all 3 at once, you know. So we're like, we really need to come up with ways of making this more sustainable. And so putting some of that money towards this would hopefully enable us to make sure that we can get a few interns every year on an ongoing basis for the foreseeable future. And so, and maybe finding some way to make some sort of constant stream too, to where we can use some of that money to pay for and have a certain amount of interns each year. And so that's one of the goals that we want to do with that. And so Amy can talk about the new intern.
Yes, so we are moving forward for this fall and next year spring, kind of the school year. We have, the leadership board has approved Erin Kaufman, who is from Alamosa, so she's going to be our future Anabaptist leaders intern for that time. She is a farmer herself, and she's really fascinated by the intersection between faith and farming, and so we're gonna, do a lot of book clubs with, the Wendell Berrys and the Fred Bonsons and the Norman Wurzbas and all the authors who are talking about that, and we're hopefully some of what she does is going to be reflected in our Faith and Life Forum in the spring as well. So we'll kind of integrate that, and she just seems really great. Seems like kind of a perfect fit at a good point in life to sort of try on some new ministry opportunities and just grow as a person. And so be on the lookout, because I will definitely be promoting her once we've had her approved, but we don't have our full plan for what this year is going to look like exactly. Once we do, then I'm sure in the Zing and maybe other places we'll be sharing that with all of you and saying, hey, who wants to step up and help support her or be part of this with her, or who has things to give, because it's a mutual relationship is the goal, that she would learn from us and we would learn from her. So that is moving forward. So that's exciting.
And we have learned a lot. We tried to get some interns this summer. That didn't work out. Everybody got a dog during the pandemic, and nobody wanted to move away or go away for the summer. And so we were like, oh yeah, we would love to do that, but I have a dog, and I don't want to leave my dog. So sorry. So we really did try to get some people out here this summer, but that was really the main reason that we heard again and again was we have a dog. So who knew? Pandemic really hindered our ability to get one this summer. So hopefully that eases once the pandemic now is eased.
Well, is that... I know, we do. Well, that's the thing. We may find a dog-friendly location for somebody to land in next year, and then it won't be a problem.
We have to advertise it, though.
Yeah, we didn't advertise. Anyway, we learned from the dog thing.
Who knew? Yep.
It was good.
And then the last piece that the leadership board is proposing will be to increase Amy's hours for a 2-year period to work on these initiatives. Amy's right now is doing a research grant that is taking up 10 hours a week, or 25% of her time. And that will go through July of next year. And so at the conclusion of that research grant, we would like to see Amy move from 3/4 time to full time, where she spends that remaining 1/4 time that we're adding, specifically working on launching and supporting these new initiatives for a 2-year period to get them running and rolling, and hopefully they won't need as much conference support after those time, or maybe we have a social enterprise up and we can deal with excess money then. So there'll be some sort of lag in a year, which we can get task force and get some basic work moving, and then we will have proposing that Amy's will be focusing 10 hours a week specifically on these 2 main initiatives for a 2-year period of time.
It was his idea.
It was. I don't want to give her more work, add to her work, and not give her more money. That doesn't seem right.
Yeah. And I am 3/4 time, so.
Yeah. So here's the breakdown of what we are proposing as a leadership board. So there's about $338,000. Of that, we're splitting 125,000 we're asking to go to the church community planting, 125,000 to starting a social enterprise, about 46,000 going to the future Anabaptist leaders to support interns for our churches and our conference, and then it would be about 42,000 to move Amy from 3/4 time to full time for that 2-year period. And so as delegates, in a little bit when we get to the delegate section, you'll see there's actually 2 budgets. There will be budget A, which will be our normal budget, and budget B, which would be with the increasing of Amy's time for July through December of 2023. Depending on how this initiative goes will depend on which budget we end up approving. So if delegates say, we don't like this, we want you leadership board to go back to the drawing board, then we'll go with budget A. And if the delegates say, we like this, we'll go with budget B. And so that's why, if you were wondering why there were 2 budgets that we brought forward to the delegates, it was really dependent on what the delegates decided to do with this proposal and ideas that the leadership board is bringing forward today.
So the question is, does this mean that your churches are off the hook, right? Do you like this little picture of the cute little bird on the hook? As you'll notice, the bird is still on the hook. And this is because y'all's churches still on the hook, right? And so the goal of these initiatives is not to essentially replace what we've already been doing. It's to make up for some, I would say, minor losses, but definite losses over the course of the pandemic. We have giving from churches is down about 10%, so small losses. So it's to help make up for that, and then it's to make our conference more sustainable and to enable us to grow our ministries more in the days, weeks, months, years to come, right? So the goal is definitely not, oh, sweet, they've got money, they don't need us to donate to the conference, right? They don't need anything. No, the goal is that we would continue all the amazing support that your churches already give to the conference, and that we'd be able to increase our influence, increase what we're doing in the world. So that's the goal. Does that make sense? Okay. I hate asking for money, so I don't like this.
That's my job.
Yeah. I can do it every once in a while. So yeah, I do want to say that we, as you can tell, hopefully you can tell, we are pretty excited about this. And like Ryan said, we've had quite a few behind the scenes conversations over the course of, with the leadership board kind of over the course of the last almost year. And so some of you are kind of hearing about these ideas maybe for the very first time, or you've heard little rumblings. We definitely don't want this to be, we've already figured it out and you just need to rubber stamp it. But we didn't want our ideas not formed at all and just say, what should we do, right? Because that can create, we were talking this morning, that can create a lot of conflict sometimes in institutions. And so we don't even know what the social enterprise would be. We don't have task forces formed on all this, and so we would be soliciting you all and your churches to be involved, however you feel led to be. And we want you to help shape this, because this is not a leadership thing. This is a conference thing, right? This will fail if y'all are not excited about it, right? Both of these major ideas of new initiatives are not going to happen. They're not going to work out if it's just Ryan, me, the leadership board, a few other leaders say, yeah, let's put in like all our blood, sweat, and tears, right? Hopefully not too much blood. If we do that and folks in churches and congregations, in passion ministries aren't excited about it, then it will definitely fail. And so that's part of why we want your input, why we want to discern this together, is so that we can do this together. So it really can be some conference-wide initiatives. So yeah, that's our spiel. Do you have anything else on the list?
I'm good.
So now I think we can move to Q&A time. So you can ask questions, you can give feedback, positive, negative, confused, concerned, whatever. And I think do we have a way of
Do we have a
bringing
mic?
around a
We have
mic?
mics back here.
We
I'll
got
ask everybody to
mics.
raise your hand when you want to ask a question or say something. And also, please remember that you got to hold the mic close to your mouth so the people on the Zoom can hear you as well as the people in the actual sanctuary.
Yep, and
Thank
Zoom
you.
folks can write in, is that how we're doing it, Stefan? Yep, okay, can write in comments and those will be read. We got Steve.
Well, I'll get up so I'm not sitting on an idea. My name is Steve Raymer from Fort Collins, and I just do want to really affirm the fact that you're not squirreling this away, digging a hole, putting it in the ground, which would be the safe thing to do, but spending it and investing it. I see it certainly as an investment, and I've always found that the best way to raise more money is to show people that you're doing something with the money you already have. I mean, I think that's been our experience at our congregation, where our budget's continuing to grow every year. People are happy to give when they know that it's being used. The way to stop people from giving money is to let them see that you're not doing anything. You know, I don't want to give to the conference if we got a big bank account. But if you're doing some good and you need the money, then I'll probably dig a little deeper.
Thanks.
We have one.
We got Katie.
Katie Cunningham from Albuquerque. I wondered what's happened with the Passion Ministry that Sarah Jackson started, working with people coming out of immigration. Is that over, or are they self-sustaining?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, good question. So we chose not to put it as one of our top, as one of the 3 featured passion ministries on this, because no one from Casa de Paz has ever been a credentialed leader in our conference, whereas all 3 of these Raw Tools, Tilt, and Prayer Stream all have credentialed leaders at the helm of them, and so that was part of why we made that editorial decision. Casa de Paz is still trucking along. As far as I can tell, they are still going strong. They did have a really big hiccup where Sarah Jackson was asked to leave. I can send you the email, the public email that they sent out to the email list that they had, so I can forward that to you. And anyone else who's interested, let me know. I can forward that to you. That has more of the details of what happened with that. It was quite an unfortunate parting. It was not a happy parting, but they immediately had a new executive director, and it seems that they're still going strong. So, yep.
This is Brian Miller from Bethel. Well, I appreciate the amount of work that you folks have put into kind of deciding what to do with this estate gift. And I like that it's not just one big bucket idea. You know, you've got it going in different areas, which also spans numerous years. I'm wondering, is there a way later that the delegates can, how would I say it? We don't want to vote on them independently because there's kind of 4 different initiatives in there that are mixed together. Is there a way that we can at least say the interest within the conference is for these different units separately? I know that the budget has everything in one or everything out of the other. Mm-hmm. So is it interesting to pull that data back to say, well, people are really excited about the social enterprise?
Mm-hmm. Right. I would love to hear it here, if possible. So if people
So if you
would explain that, because I think we'll have more time to address some of that here than in that meeting, which we have a lot going on. So if people have that, like, yeah, I'm really passionate about this, please speak to that.
I just want to, since you wanted to hear it here, Matt from Defiance Church, I echo his concerns too. Actually, I almost feel like, you did all this work, so you don't want to put all this, like, it's a lot of work to then rewrite everything. But I think it would be interesting to see Amy go full-time a year and then do more groundwork on which ideas actually conference has energy for, rather than pre-approve ideas where we're not sure, like, which ones have legs. And, like you said, there's 4 enterprises in there. That's just a lot. And it's not against any of them or against making Amy full-time. I think maybe full-time gives her the imagination to say, this is the project that needs my time. And it's 10 hours. I mean, that's a lot of work for an extra 10 hours. So that would be, I would share this gentleman's concern.
Yeah, I don't think we're prepared for that today, and so I think it would have to take a voting down for that. Well, if that happened, we would go back to the drawing board and do that. Let me just speak for a second for the where we are and why I think social enterprise was something that the leadership board, and particularly me, have been really passionate about. Mainly because I do think our revenues are dwindling slowly, as Amy said, as a conference. And the really troubling thing, if I'm gonna put some fear out there, because from my spot, the really troubling thing for me is like the majority of our income comes from 6 places, and really the majority of that comes from 3. But there's 6 churches that give the heavy lifting of the budget. So if something happens to one of those 6 churches, if one of those 6 churches falls on rough times, Amy's time, our conference, our funding is in trouble. And I see Ken shaking his head. Ken knows this very well as moderator, a previous moderator. We do not have a bulk of revenue streams. We're a small conference of 17 churches. We have 1 closing at the end of the year. I mean, if I project out, we're probably going to have 1 or 2 maybe close over the next 10 years. So that's why if we need new churches, we don't want that. But we also need new revenue coming in from other ways. And I think asking churches to give more and more and more it's hard on churches. Churches are having a hard time. There's lots of things that they want to support. And overall, church giving is not increasing. Some churches might be increasing a little bit to their budget, but overall, church giving to the conference is dwindling. And so that's where we are. And so I think what we're going to see in Mennonite Church USA, it kind of rivals, and this would be a hypothetical, imaginary question, kind of rivals what's happening in college football. And this is my world. In college football, as we're seeing now, we're going to have 2 super conferences. You're going to have the SEC and you're going to have the Big Ten, right? And they're going to span from coast to coast, and they're not going to be regional anymore. And before it's said and done, the SEC is going to have 24 teams. The Big Ten is going to have 24 teams in 6 to 10 years from now. And then there's just going to be a bunch of people trying to straggle it together. And that's my fear of where Mennonite Church USA is going to end up too. We're going to have 2 power conferences, and then that aren't regions, right? They're going to have all the money and all the power, and they're not going to be regions. And so I think a question.
We're going to ask Rachel her opinion on this during.
Well,
her
that's fine.
session
She might disagree, or she might not want to comment, but I think we're already seeing that start, and we'll see how things change over the next couple months and years. But is it a priority for us to have a Colorado-New Mexico conference? And if that's a priority, then we need to sustain it. And if it's not a priority, then maybe we don't need to sustain it. But to me, as a leadership board, that's a priority. Relational accountability, supporting our churches, getting to know one another, being able to meet in person as a group is a priority. And so I want to do, or at least try to do things that enable that to happen in the future. All right, we got lots of questions, lots of things.
Thank you, Ryan. I received the urgency, and I'm excited about all 4 initiatives. I think my question comes from, maybe you could share about why you picked 125 for the first 2, because I wonder about if we have a social enterprise that needs 175 to get off the ground, but we don't know that yet because we haven't picked it. Why these numbers, and is there a way that we could say yes, but also if we need to flex some of those categories because XY church plan is going to take more of it, can that be built into it?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
I think at some point that there's probably some flex, and there might be some fundraising initiatives that would have to happen in the future. We just feel like this was a solid base to work with both, and to enable both of these initiatives to begin the work and to do the work and to figure out the exact amount, and to feel like we weren't just giving them nothing to work with and then saying, here, it's your task, but we're giving them something substantial to work with and saying, we believe that if you need more, that we will find ways to get more.
Can we put like a clause of an amount of wiggle room in the budget? Is that can you ever do budgets that way, that it would be like a range?
Yeah.
Just thinking out loud here. I don't know. Depends on who's running the budget.
Yeah, there's lots of hands up.
Yeah. Yeah, Ken.
Yeah, I affirm the idea of being flexible with the way you go about putting this together, as much flexibility like that. Have you given, another question is, $330,000 is a lot, but it's not a lot.
Exactly.
And what kind of leveraging have you been thinking about? Like with for example, with the social entrepreneurial thing, what about a public-private kind of partnership? Could you get additional funding put together to form a corporation of some sort and invite individuals to get involved in that kind of thing? Is that out of the realm, or are those kinds of things a possibility?
Those are definitely possibilities. There's possibilities of doing something bigger and asking churches to partner. I mean, I think this is really, once it goes forward, having a task force come up with some of those main ideas. I have my dreams of like, what if we just like did like a solar farm and we had like all these churches come in and participate, and that's like a great way of doing something good. There's so many ideas out there, and I think the key is we all have our ideas, and we just need to get the task force up and running and empower them to actually come up with the ideas and implement them. Yep.
Yeah, well, Mauricio Chandler, I work for Msusa church planting, and this is great. I mean, one of the things we face in our system is the lack of conference ministers who are engaged in reproduction and multiplication. You are talking about that, basically reproduction and multiplication. And having a conference minister that is moving into that direction is good news, is wonderful news. I think this is super good. The other thing I think is important is to see what Ken was raising. In the bigger system, Everance, Mennonite Mission Network, MCC, they are searching for this kind of leadership. So there you have potential partners that they might come up with matching grants. So that's another thing that is also super interesting. And I will also say that what I will try to recommend when you form this task force is that you kind of invite people that have been doing this work in your conference. I know Matt, Zach, I know there are so many. I kind of, get their kind of theological, missiological mindset there in doing this kind of emerging communities type of work, but also get in there somebody that is good for business with money, money-making people. This kind of work, for example, in Brooklyn, we inherited a building, $2 million worth of investment. We invited a guy from Everance, somebody from MCC, somebody from the conference, and the church planters. So try to create a multidisciplinary, task force that will bring all those eyes together for success. That might fly really well. And the other thing I will also kind of remind you, in 2013, with Jaime Lázaro from Colorado Springs, I came here and we visited in 14 days, like 7 groups that were kind of emerging. So the potential is there, and I think that if Amy will be kind of spending 1/4 time of that time, I agree with Matt, in visiting, exploring new leadership, new groups, newcomers. The Mennonites, we suffer of this sectarian mentality that we think that this whole thing is for our fellowships. But there are a lot of newcomers, that come through seminaries, Duke, Fuller, name it. These are people that are searching for the values that we hold. So keep that also in your sight, like how do we attract these newcomers that are beyond evangelicalism, beyond white supremacy, beyond all these things that we know that they're ready for something different. And this conference is fertile ground for that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mauricio.
So Anita from Albuquerque Mennonite Church, I just want to really affirm, this vision, especially the church or community planting with launching a social enterprise, the ability to fund it. But one thing that really comes up for me is the changing landscape around pastoral ministry and churches, as you were saying, Ryan, how many churches you have actually supporting the conference through their funds and how many aren't. And so there's a changing landscape, and what does pastoral ministry mean and what does it look like, I think, as we even think about church planting. I remember when I first started at Albuquerque Mennonite Church a zillion years ago, and I started at 20 hours, and I had a tent-making ministry at the Center for Action and Contemplation. But I remember how guilty I felt when my salary consumed most of the resources of that church, and how grateful I was when it was just a small portion years later, partly because I always chose to work not full-time, but also we got a building and all that stuff. But I'm just really aware of how energy follows the money. So I really affirm Amy having, that other 10% or whatever. But I think growing ministries alongside that really can fund is really brilliant. So, and also to continue to think about how we think about pastoral ministry and churches in this age where the landscape and economics are really changing. And what do we want our churches to look like as we're building new ones? Do we want it to look the same kind of centralized model or not? Is that really even feasible? So that's what we're looking at, kind of this, we're still going along with the same kind of lunky kind of, centralized model, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I am all for creative.
Andy Gingrich, Grand Junction. I had some thoughts and then had many other thoughts hearing other people talk. I don't know what I'm going to pick. I think to the question about is our conference focused on Colorado, New Mexico, is that important? I'd say absolutely, emphatically yes. I've had this concern since more than a decade. And when I was on the leadership board, during Theta Good's ordination, we had kind of requests from other churches that were in other places because of kind of what we were opening up with that here. And we had hard discussions about that, but we felt like space mattered to us. And thought that it was important to be in community with people geographically near. And I think the reason why I'm urban planner is because I believe space is real as much as our dominant culture doesn't seem to think so. On the topic of the budget, I was trying not to think about work this weekend, but I'm a transit planner and I work with FTA grants. And oh God, the idea of spending money without all those federal clauses sounds like a lot of fun.
I know, right?
But,
oh my goodness.
When we contract, when we have our federal grants to run transit, we opened up a grant that we get, and we have line items of how we're going to spend the money. You can use it flexibly, the main grant. And then we submit that, and then if there's a change, like, oh, we want to use a little bit more for capital versus operations, then we have to go back to the FTA and we have to amend that. And sometimes that's a big deal and sometimes it's not. But I don't think we should be that concerned about 125,000 on each end. I think what's important is that there's constant communication from the leadership about that. And maybe there is a set amount, but there's a request, we actually want to use, based on our findings, we want to use 25, 50,000 more or less. I think it makes sense to be flexible at that because no one knows what's going to happen. And I guess the last thing I'd say is it seems like a balanced approach where, like was shared, that if you plant new churches, it's going to be a while before there's any revenue generation from that, to say it in business terms. So realizing that's important, but also seeking another kind of more immediate kind of financial solution is, I think, appropriate. So.
We have 3 minutes. I'm going to say we have time for 2 more comments. Travis and somebody else.
Yeah, Travis from Bethel Mennonite, and well, I guess starting on Monday, Service Adventure Leader. I had a question about the graph here and where the money's going. As someone that's going to be Service Adventure, obviously social enterprise is very important to me, and I wish it could be 100% social enterprise. But I did have a question. We were, on the previous slides, we were talking about exemplary enterprise, and I was just curious why that's not in that budget, even though that's something we're kind of looking towards. I was just trying to figure out those.
Yeah, sorry. So
why one's in social and why one's exemplary.
Yeah, so we were thinking out of models of social enterprise endeavors. These are 3 common models, and we're recommending exemplary as kind of the middle way where it is a for-profit. The goal is to make some money, but you're doing it ethically. So yeah, but we were kind of just explaining the basically theory of ways to do social enterprise. Does that make sense? So yeah, so we're only, like, if this gets approved, if that $125,000 for social enterprise gets approved, we're proposing that it would be an exemplary social enterprise. So yes, we could have included that.
We could have just said, towards an exemplary social enterprise.
Yeah,
that would have clarified that. Yep.
Hi, I'm Mary Johnson, and I have a couple of comments. One is, for those of us that are here, the conference is important, but how many people that go to our congregations are not here and it isn't important to them? Or how many people won't even come to worship tomorrow because they see this as a time to go play and do other things? I think we need to pose that question to our congregations before we assume that the conference is important. And I know that sounds very negative, but I think that is crucial in being able to then go to, like, this proposed budget and to all of these other things, because I just think that's really important. The other thing that I have to say is that in your home and in your own budgeting, would you approve a budget for something that you don't really know what it's going to be yet? So as far as the social enterprise, that's where I have an issue. I'd like to know what that social enterprise is before I would say, yes, I support that, or no, I don't support that, because I could see with the varying congregations that we have and how they feel about things, that might not be, whatever we pick might not be what everybody can agree upon to support. And if you're asking the churches to support that through manpower or whatever, that could be an issue. So I would propose some sort of initiative that, dare I say it, but brings money without a whole lot of active volunteerism. And I say that because maybe there are some congregations that have a lot of people that are able to volunteer, but I know people are working, or they are unable to volunteer because they're older. And so I think we have to consider those things, and I support that. I support doing these kinds of enterprises. Don't get me wrong, but I think we need to do some more research.
Yeah, and that was the really hard balance that we were trying to find. Maybe we didn't find it, of not creating task forces yet to figure out all these ideas of, do we pay the people who are working, or do we rely on volunteer support? What is a social enterprise? And we didn't feel like we had the expertise as leadership board to have a fully formed idea to present to you all. We felt like this was the stage we wanted to, but it is going to require trust, and I don't know if we need to have another discussion before it gets approved. I don't know. That would be something to look at. To have the leadership board to have whatever task force the leadership board approves, once they have their idea, to bring that back to delegates. I don't know if that would make sense or not, so that people can really weigh in at that point and say, nope, we don't think this is going to work in this market, go back to the drawing board. Or, yeah, I've seen this work over here. Have you seen these models? And have lots of, community buy-in / weighing in on the ideas. I'd be totally fine with that. Yeah, but that's a hard thing. We're trying to find this balance of, because I think leadership in this conference has been criticized before of, well, you just bring the idea fully formed, right? We don't have any say.
Yeah.
So we're trying to not do that.
Yep. And we are out of time. I think Amy has a few announcements before lunch.
I do. Okay. So, so I guess what are steps forward with some of the different ideas and thoughts that folks shared that in the delegate session?
So the delegate session, we will only have like a few minutes for discussion, and that will be any questions relating to the motion to bring it, if people so move. I'll ask for the people to so move to bring the motion to approve the leadership budget. And there'll be a time for voting. And so there'll be questions will be taken about the specifics of it, but not about any other aspects of it. And so if the delegates vote no, then the leadership board will go back to the drawing board and figure out what to do next. If that means going forward and figuring out the social enterprise and all of that, we understand. But it will be bringing forth a motion if people affirm my desire to bring forth the motion to vote on approving this.
And I would just say that some of the concerns did seem to be actually a theme of a lot of the concerns was just like, how set in stone is this, right? Like, are we, what if it's 126,000, not 125,000, right? Like, what do we do with that? And I mean, I think what Andy brought up was a good point of you go back, if you have a grant from the government. I worked in nonprofits for almost a decade, right? If you need to go back, then you go back and you ask for something else, or you say, oh, we're not going to use all of this, and it's a conversation. That's how I see this. Yep. This budget is not set in stone. I don't see it as fully, chiseled out and hammered out.
And we'll have opportunities to come back to delegates about those things in the future. We can always do things virtually if we need to do it before next meeting. But I mean, with the reality of Amy's time really picking up next July, we also would likely have that July of 2023. So if we have, the task force says this is what we want to do exactly, we know the social enterprise is going to cost $150, the church plan is going to cost $100, that would give us time before Amy goes full-time in 2023. And lots of those things probably get implemented to come back to the delegates and say, hey, will you alter these amounts, and this is why. We just want to really start getting this work moving, and we feel like this is the path forward to enable some of that work to begin.
So thank you so much for this conversation. This is wonderful and very helpful. A couple announcements. One, we have a Kathy question. Oh, okay.
There's a tech question? No?
Are we good? Okay. A couple announcements. One is that Prayer Stream is out in the parking lot, so avail yourself of prayers. You can never have too much. We have lunch coming up, and that will obviously be in the community center, but you feel free to take your lunch outside if you want to. There's beautiful, the back area is gorgeous. And then after lunch, we're going to have our breakout sessions, our workshops. So the Msusa Workshop is going to be here in the sanctuary, and that's going to be with Rachel Ringenberg-Miller. So you can ask all